All right, folks. Welcome once again to the KeltShow.
It's gonna be fantastic. Hey, KeltShow. Hi, Metatron. I did my first stream today. That's fantastic. Next, I'll be discussing your videos about the Celts from a sober academic perspective. Oh, I love that. Oh, because you're KeltShow. Makes sense. I invite you to respond to the points I'll make. Can you shout me out? Yeah, I mean, sure. You guys can check him out. He's here. I'll give him a heart so you can see it. Just click here to see his channel. You can go to channel. And I'll definitely check out your video once I have time to do it, but I will do it. And so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Very cool, very cool. I mean, guys, a channel dedicated to Celts is really interesting. I love talking about Celts, 100%, 100%.
All right, folks. We got a shout out by the very Metatron himself. What an honor. I truly appreciate that, my friend. I consider you my friend, even though we haven't met. But I very much appreciate your content in every way. And I would like to think that I'm here to add to it and not to negate the content that you have made on the Celts. There are various traps and within Celtic research that are very easy to fall into. And hopefully I'm here to try and bring light to these and point them out. And so let's start. I don't have anything queued up, as you know from this show. If you have watched the first stream, this is supposed to be a live setting up and doing things, and then hopefully later on I will, or some artificial intelligence will edit the video and then cut up all of the parts that are, dead air or contentless, and make it nice and short, or shorter at least. But live, I will be doing things live with you. And I should not forget to go to the chat here, just in case there's anyone. Let's see how I go to the chat. The Twitch chat, I believe I can see already. Seems to be no one there. And then for the YouTube chat, I need to open this other link here. I already tested that the audio is coming out, I suppose. Yeah, so the audio is coming out. Alright, so that's the chat. Nobody on YouTube either, I suppose. So let's start here by finding, because now Metatron has several channels. I don't know exactly if he's reorganized the placement of the Celtic videos that he has, the videos on the Celts that he has. So at first, we should probably just search YouTube in general. By the way, these links that are open here on the left are the links that we explored on the first video. I left them open in case we might just quickly come back to them. But I do have some updates on at least one of them, which I will give you soon and shortly. Let's first find at least one of the videos here. And also to avoid Metatron. To avoid any sort of copyright claims, I know the Metatron is a friendly guy, but I don't want to exploit his friendliness. I don't want to just play his entire video. I will very much be playing very narrow slices of his videos, and I will find them elsewhere outside of this stream on another computer, so you cannot see and you cannot hear. And by the way, I don't want his latest video, I want his next to latest, is that how you would say? Because then, history of ancient Celts, kings and generals, that wasn't it. But this is one of them, and I believe this could be the latest one. Yeah, I believe it is the latest one. Let's find the other one. Oh, that's my stream. Look at that. That's nice that I can just find it like that. The origins of the Celts, 6 months ago as well. Hard to tell which one of which now is the first. And then the real 2 months ago. So this is the latest. This is 1 year ago, but that's the Kings and Generals one. The true origins of shields. Wow. His videos are amazing. That's why I watch all of them. The truth about the Moors once and for all. Interesting. Yeah, I can do one of those too. Lex Friedman's guest spoke about ancient civilizations, blew my mind. The history of the Celts, but that's not him. Let's just notice first here so that I can funnel down in which channels he's publishing these. Metatron history. And then clips as well. Interesting. What else here? Not sure what this is on. Oh, Celtic Warfare. Okay, that's more specific. And this is that latest one. Okay. Okay. I didn't anticipate it being this confusing for me, but maybe it's because for me, maybe it's because we're just a tad unfamiliar here with where he puts these. So this is history, so let's see. Is this in order? 2 months ago, 1 month ago. So this, of course, has to be the most recent, and then there's not another one here. Okay, but I know that he has another one. We'll go to clips later. Where's the loop? Oh, here it is. Six months ago, and 1645. I think it's the exact same video. I think it is. I wonder if I watched this thinking it was a general video. Sumerians. Oh wow. Cannot be. The Etruscans. Okay, interesting. And what about here? 6 months ago. The true origin. Then this is 9/15. Okay. Okay, so at least hold on a sec. The one that was, this was also 6 months ago, and then he used the same thing, same avatar. True origin, it's not avatar, the name I forgot. Thumbnail. True origin is Etruscans. Okay. Okay. Maybe he pulled it, I'm not sure. Ancient origin of the Celts. Is this a video? Looks different here. Let me check. So now I'm gonna go to my other computer and then I'm gonna play some of these to find out which one I actually mean to examine, and then I'll let you know which one I'm watching. So I'm gonna put on my headphones. Search here. Okay, so I'm watching some of these videos now. Okay. One of them is not the one I remember. Oh, but it was a year ago. I'll give it another chance. I think I know of a way to search for this. One moment. Looking for it. I did think that because I have spoken with Metatron before, and unless I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I mean, from my side, that's what I remember. But I thought we were talking about a specific video he had put out. The Origins. 7 months ago. I think there was a video in 2023. So that's the one that I was trying to find. But it might not have been entitled that. Now I see why. Well, I have a clue on how to find it now. And then, yeah, that. Oh, I think I now know which one it is. Let me confirm. So this is the video I'm watching now. I believe it is this one that I wanted to respond to first. So basically, he's talking about these articles here, saying that the Irish are not Celts, say experts. Now, not all of this will be relevant to us in this stream. I'm just watching here separately. So even Barry Cunliffe is talking about this. He's mentioning these articles. So okay, so at the minute 3:39, let me play that part for you. Or rather, where does he start? Let me verify. Okay, let's start from 3:18.
So to speak. Why am I so strongly against this statement where they say that this DNA discovery, quote, could completely change the perception of Irish ancestry? That is because what we're trying to establish here is if the Irish are in fact Celtic. And because Celtic is a cultural aspect, the DNA analysis is completely irrelevant.
All right. So because Celtic is a cultural aspect, the DNA analysis is completely irrelevant. So one of the starting points, according to Socrates, right, to cite Socrates in this conversation, but still, is examine your assumptions, and so ask yourself these questions that haven't been asked and or that are being assumed. How do we know? Why is it actually that these cultures are called Celtic? Where did the name come from? And we saw that in the last stream, and I have it open here, that it was with George Buchanan in History of Scotland, published in 1582, where he says, and I quote, starting from, I'm going to put it at the top of the screen so you know where I am, because I know you cannot see my cursor. So starting at the top of the screen at the first line, he says, I am easily induced to believe that before the coming in of the Saxons, all the Britons used a language not much different from each other, and it is probable that the nations adjoining to the Gallic shore used the Belgic tongue, from whose limits a good part of the Britons bordering on France had made a transmigration, as Caesar informs us. But the Irish and the colonies sent from them, being derived from the Celti, inhabitants of Spain, 'tis probable they spake the Celtic tongue. And so basically here's where he coins these two complementing names for the whole of what today we call the Celtic languages, and from there Celtic culture. And here's the beginning of it all. And to him, the addition or the summation, both the pairing of these languages together, the Belgic and the Celtic, Belgic on the north of Gaul and then into Britain, and then Celtic in the southern part of Gaul, and then into Spain, as he says one page before this, as we saw yesterday. The pairing of these two, the both of them together, that grouping, he calls the Gallic languages. Let me see if I can show you that he does that, but it's I don't know exactly where it is on his book itself, but let me find something that I can use to show you that this happens, because I think I do have it here. And I hope that this will be accessible to us. Okay, so we'll go straight to the PDF and then we'll just search there. Here we go. So, who is this that is writing this paper? John Collis. This is from the University of Sheffield in Great Britain, the United Kingdom, I'm sorry. Where were we here? Here we are. So here's what he says. I haven't read this. This was pointed out to me by ChatGPT. So let's read this together. And then hopefully I won't read something that is irrelevant. What are now called the Celtic languages, here's where I am, were originally recognized as a group by George Buchanan, according to John Collis' 1999 publication. But he used the term lingua gallica, while languages labeled linguae Celticae only formed a subgroup within it, Irish and Scottish Gaelic. Pasron, so that's Yves, what is his name? Paul Yves Pasron, wrongly identified, here's where I am now. So Paul Yves Pasron wrongly identified the language of the Bretons as descended from that of the ancient Celts described by Caesar. Breton has long been recognized as an introduction from Britain in the 5th to 6th centuries AD by Snyder in a 2003 publication. But Pasron in a 1703 publication did not include Irish and Scots Gaelic in his book, and it is not until Lewid in a 1707 publication that all the languages we now call Celtic were included, and he followed Pasron rather than Buchanan in calling them Celtic. Using the language as the defining characteristic for calling people Celts before the 18th century is clearly not historically acceptable, as the grouping of the languages was simply not recognized. Okay, so this is speaking directly to what Metatron talked about here, and I think it would refute it at a level that is not about talking about the bones. Okay, so let's put aside a little bit for now the conversation about the bones, because it doesn't matter here, because whatever the bones are, if that article is correct or not, okay, whatever ends up happening or being the result of that article, nevertheless, using the language as a defining characteristic for calling people Celts before the 18th century is clearly not historically acceptable, as the grouping of the languages was simply not recognized. So, and here, these Celts are from an extension of the language, okay? Not from coming from the past, the Celts that the Greco-Romans talked about. He's talking about referring specifically to Irish and Scottish Gaelic as Celts before the 18th century. So the point here is, Metatron, is that we get lost in the conversation about the Irish and the Scottish Gaelic, or the Scots Gaelic, is that how I should say, that they are Celtic in some way. And then we forget, how is it that they're Celtic? Well, first and foremost, they're Celtic because they have been associated with this label that Lewis started in 1707, so the 18th century, called the Celtic languages, okay? Before that, and if only Lewis had gone instead of with Pezron, Paul's Pezron, he had gone with Buchanan, then these languages today would have been called the Gaelic languages, okay? The languages that we call Irish, Scots Gaelic, and Cornish, Breton, Welsh, and Manx, okay? These languages that we call today Celtic languages, we could just as well have been calling them the Gaelic languages if only Lewis had gone with Buchanan's labeling of the languages rather than with Paulive Pezron's labels. Do you see then, Metatron, that the discussion here is somewhat virtual? It's sort of it doesn't touch on the actual point. You know, that's why like the bones don't matter, because the point here is the calling of anything to do with Irish and Scottish Gaelic and Breton and Welsh and so on. The calling of that Celtic is from an arbitrary choice that could have just as well been Gaelic. And then we would have had that article that you were talking about saying that maybe the Irish are not really the Gaelics instead of the Celtics. You see what I mean? So that's why this name here has actually no connection to the Celts as talked about by the Greco-Romans, which we'll get to shortly. But I'm just trying to at first show that this connection that we assume here when we talk about the Irish and the Scottish being Celts, that connection to the past does not exist. Okay? So regardless of what they found out from the bones, they're not going to be the Celts anyway, because that label was arbitrarily chosen, and it almost was Gaelic, and then we would have been having this discussion about Gaelic, which shows that this label is not really connected to past before the 18th century. You see my point? So that label is really only connected to these people, these British Islanders. I'm sorry, maybe Paulive Pezron, I think, was actually from Brittany in the northwestern part of France. I believe so. I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But it doesn't matter for now here. So we'll move on. Otherwise, we will get into so many tangents because I have a lot to talk about. So the point here is that this connection doesn't really exist outside of this language connection. And when you say on your video, Metatron, that the Celtic culture, let me play again how you put it. I don't want to misconstrue.
I so strongly against this statement where they say that this DNA discovery, quote, could completely change the perception of Irish ancestry. That is because what we're trying to establish here is if the Irish are in fact Celtic. And because Celtic is a cultural aspect,
So because Celtic is a cultural aspect,
the DNA analysis is completely irrelevant.
right? And for our discussions, yes, all of that DNA or whatever bones is completely irrelevant. And now, Celtic as a cultural aspect, again, comes from this language nomenclature. It comes from this decision. So you see now how we could have been talking about the Gaelic culture instead, or Gaelic cultural aspects of the Irish and the Scottish Gaelic instead, if only Lewid had gone with Buchanan's labeling instead of with Pasbon's labeling. Do you see the point that I'm making? So do you see now how this label is virtual? Virtual in the sense of it's arbitrary and not connected to anything that has first principles. It's not connected to a foundation other than an arbitrary choice. And we saw yesterday, and maybe I should just, for completeness, show it today as well, that the reason, and there's even a passage that we found that was wholly illustrative of the point. Oh, here it is. So in Metatron, this is another important part. This is because this is the first, as Collis explains in the paper that I was just on before, it's the first time that the phrase Celtic language or Celtic tongue is coined. And although it is here only for the Gaelic languages, for the Gaelic branch, or for the Q branch, and then for him, it's the Gallic languages, which encompass both the Celtic tongues and the Belgic tongues. Okay, so he makes that differentiation. So for him, the P Celtic are the Belgic tongues, and the Q Celtic are the Celtic tongues. Okay, but then here's the important part that illustrates why is it that he actually calls them Celtic and Belgic. He says, for at first, and by the way, I'm going to put it on the top because I know you cannot see my cursor. So the first line now, in the middle of it. For at first, the A, Celtai, and the B, Belgai, did use a different dialect, as Strabo thinks, or Strabo. Afterwards, when the Celtai sent abroad great colonies into Spain, as the names of the Celtiberi and Celtici do declare, and the Belgai made their descent into the maritime parts of Britain, as may be collected from the names of the C. Venta Belgarum, of the D. Atrabates, and E. Iceni, it must needs follow that on the one side of the Spaniards, and on the other the Romans, the English, the Danes, and the Normans must bring in many strange words with them, and so corrupt the country speech. Because the whole point for him is about the languages, but the illustration here of where he's pulling each name and where he's finding the documentation for each name. He starts with the Celtai, which for him are on the southern part of Gaul. And then he starts also with the Belgai, which of course on the northern part of Gaul. And to him, those are the most emblematic peoples to represent the differences between the tongues that he assumes existed. Okay? And so there's actually another passage that makes it clearer that he's taking it from the Celts of Spain and not from the Celts of Gaul, the naming of these branches. Let me find it here. Oh, here it is, which I think I just read, but I'll just read it again, and then I'll put it in the beginning here. So at the end of the first line, I am easily induced to believe that before the coming in of the Saxons, all the Britons used the language not much different from each other, and it is probable that the nations adjoining to the Gallic shore used the Belgic tongue. So here is the northern Gauls, and then the southern Britons spoke the Belgic tongue, what he calls, from whose limits a good part of the Britons bordering on France had made a transmigration, as Caesar informs us. But the Irish and the colonies sent from them, being derived from the Celti, inhabitants of Spain, so here he locates these Celti as the inhabitants of Spain, 'tis probable they spoke the Celtic tongue. So that's where he got the label Celtic and Belgic. Of course, he got the label Belgic from Belgae. That's easy to see. But just as well, we should know that for the first time when the label Celtic tongue was created, in this case, instead of Celtic language, dear Metatron, and I mean this sincerely, there's no irony here. I'm just saying dear Metatron to refer to you instead of oh Metatron, but I should probably also say oh Metatron. But I don't want to be too formal. The point here, Metatron, is that this is the point that he coined these two. Maybe somewhere else, I believe in the book, it's just so hard for me to find, but I will find a plain text copy and then I will search this later. But at some other point here, he then groups these two as the Gallic tongues, okay, as the Gallic languages. But basically, the Belgic, which to him was the P Celtic, okay, or the Brythonic branch, okay, more or less, okay, I know that they're not exactly synonymous with each other, but I'm saying roughly here, okay, because he didn't either list all the tongues anyway, all the languages, okay, but roughly to him the Belgic tongue was equivalent to the P Celtic and or the Brythonic languages, okay, and the Celtic tongue was related to the Q Celtic or the Gaelic languages, okay. So then the grouping he called them Gallic. We cannot see this here, it's elsewhere, I don't know exactly where it is on the book, but the point is he got the Belgic label for half of these Gallic tongues, exactly, of course, obviously from the Belgae, as we can clearly see, there's no discussion. And just the same, he didn't get the label Celtic from Caesar or from, you know, some cultural aspect that existed, okay? This is the first time that it's being imported into the English language, and he is taking it from the Celti of Spain. So all of this talk about Celtic languages today and Celtic culture, which is something that comes after the Celtic languages, okay, in the Anglophone world, okay, all of that, the origin of calling all of that Celtic, and incidentally not Gallic, almost calling that Gallic, the origin of that is George Buchanan in this work right here, basically this line. And so it's in reference to the Celts of Spain, because they called themselves Celts. Again, we'll go back to the Do Declare. First line on the page. When the Celti sent abroad great colonies into Spain, implicitly here from the southern part of Gaul, as the names of Celtiberi and Celtici do declare. So the whole reason for naming this branch of the Gallic languages, according to George Buchanan, the whole reason for naming this branch, Celtic languages, is because the names of the Celtiberi and the Celtici in Spain, and in general of the Celti inhabitants of Spain, now in the first line, it's because they call themselves Celts. Do you see? So we should never forget that that's where it comes from, because a lot of people will have these discussions about, were the Irish Celts? Did they find bones that prove that the Irish were not Celts? The Irish were only Celts from, and they were never actually called Celts. That's a misunderstanding. They were only ever Celtic speakers, but they only started to become Celtic speakers at this point with George Buchanan, and the Brythonic and or P-Celtic speakers only started with George Lewid. Okay? I'm so sorry, not George Lewid. His name is Edward Lewid. Okay? In 1707. So the Irish and the Scottish Gaelic can claim down to 1582 that they were being called Celtic speakers. But again, it was because of an association with the Celti of Spain. So this whole thing, this whole discussion about these bones is moot, because we know that the Irish were not the same people as the people in the Iberian Peninsula in the Iron Age. Okay, so, and we know that from books that we saw on the latest stream. on the first stream that we've made. Okay, and maybe I'll just take the clips from there instead of going through it again here. Also, I don't have them fully open, I think. I have actually some of them. This revealing the recent, I think is one of them. No, it's not. It's this one, Origin and Mobility. Here it is. We can show this clearly. French IA and Metatron. This is also another point to show you. This might not be the passage I want. Is it modern day? Yes. French Iron Age individuals fall within the genomic variability of modern day French population. So this means that the Iron Age people that they found all over France, from north to south, from the Iron Age, that DNA is exactly the same genomic variability as the modern day French population. In other words, they share the exact same genetic drift. That means that they're the same people. Continuing here, Iron Age samples from Spain. And so he's breaking now down. He's now going to break down this sentence, okay? Because as I said, this is north and south of Gaul. And so now he's going to break it down. Iron Age samples from Spain and Great Britain. By the way, I didn't even introduce the paper. But Iron Age, the name of the paper, ladies and gentlemen. Hi. The name of the paper, ladies and gentlemen, is Origin and Mobility of Iron Age Gaulish Groups even, in present-day France, revealed through archaeogenomics, okay? And then, now let me continue. Iron Age samples from Spain and Great Britain also fall within modern-day populations from the same region, highlighting a certain degree of continuity from the Iron Age to modern-day populations in Western Europe, confirming previous results based on mtDNA, okay? So, he doesn't make it clear here. It's in another passage, but basically it's the southern part of Gaul that matches Spain, and the northern part of Gaul matches Great Britain in terms of autosomal DNA and genomic variability, okay? Therefore, there is a continuity, a genetic continuity from the Iron Age to the modern day. So this paper establishes that, okay? And then this paper, or was it this one that establishes from Bronze Age to the Iron Age? But we don't need this now. But I will find that later, because now I don't remember which one was it that established that. This is modern day. And so you can see here Iberia clustering with parts of France and Switzerland, and not clustering with Italy. Okay? So these Iberians are not some kind of a Roman people who migrated there and got rid of all of the Iberians people. That's not what happened. They're the same people as they were in the Iron Age, and still today they cluster with it's not properly visual or explicit here, but these are the Eastern French actually, and the Western Swiss, and also Southern Swiss, okay, the Alpine Swiss, but we'll see that later in detail. So the point here is that, to go back, the Metatron, the results of that study don't matter for us to tell us whether the Irish were Celts or not, because just from this study, that finds that the I remember now where the it's this video that shows us that there's a continuity from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. I'm not going to play it again, but in this video he says that the Bell Beakers are also these exact two groups, which are Britons matching Great Britain, people of modern day, or Iron Age also, and I don't know which one now. And then or actually, I think we have to simply, we are the ones who are making the connection here, because what he establishes is that the Bell Beakers are these two groups, one matching the British Islanders, and I think he does say of today, and one matching Spaniards of today. And those are in the northern part and then the southern part of Western Europe, respectively. And so we know ever since the Bell Beakers spread that those people remained these two groups The Britons in the north matching Britons in general. I mean British Islanders, okay, and the Irish together, and the people in the south matching the Iberians. What basically this all means, this together with this study, and we could even show this study very quickly here, that shows that Portugal doesn't actually cluster with Italy in terms of genetic distance. This is now not PCA. PCA focuses a lot more on the differences and tries to amplify them, but this measures shared genetic drift, technically, which in layperson terms would be genetic distance. And this shows us that Portugal is very, very close to Central Europeans from northern Austria and northeastern or central eastern France. Okay, and so the Portuguese don't actually cluster. By the way, these are even the southern Portuguese. They don't cluster even with the central Italians. Okay, they only ever clustered with Republican Romans, which is it's what these are. You can see here, Iron Age Republic, if for Italy, and they don't cluster with the Imperial Romans, which are what these are. Okay, for Italy, they don't cluster with the Imperial Romans, which were the later Romans. They cluster with the beginning, the starting Romans, who were the Republican Romans. So Rome, as it went through time, it changed a bit from being more Central European shifted to becoming Mediterranean. So now they're Mediterranean people. But the Portuguese, and so which here it stands for proxy for all Iberians, they're Central European. They cluster very well together with Central Europeans. Okay? And for instance, this asterisk that is painted as pink here, I believe is Slovenia maybe, or Croatia? Slovakia, I'm so sorry. It's even northern, more northern than Slovenia. So Slovakia. Did they put this on the map? Let me check. No, but it would be here. So very much Central European, north of the Alps. You see, that's with whom these, and perhaps one sample south of the Alps, might have been an Etruscan, probably. Okay, but I don't know if the paper makes it clear which one this is. I would like to know, but I would bet it's probably an Etruscan. Because they did match the same autosomal space as Iberians. And so Metatron, as you can see, and also I believe you don't know this because you constantly group the Iberians and Italians as Southern Europeans, which of course is correct from a geographical point of view and labeling, but genetically they're not the same. The Portuguese and the Iberians in general, they cluster with these Austrians and Eastern French. They basically are together in a continuum from Britain to Iberia, which is the Bell-Beaker continuum that started 2500 BC. Okay, BC for you, Metatron, not just for you. I also use that, not BCE. There we go. And but basically, this spectrum or continuum, genetic spectrum or genetic continuum, we could call a Rhenish continuum, because it is, as we all know, the Saxons, Anglo-Saxons are Danes and Frisians, essentially, and from their historical migrations. And so that means that they are also part of this. There's the Rhine River here, very famously, right? And then it goes down, it goes with an L, and then it goes into Liechtenstein. I should just show you the page with the well, actually, when you type this, you'll always get these water pictures. That's not what I want. I actually want the map. Yeah, there you go. That's not what we want. Oh, that's a nice picture here. Oh my, that's for ants. Oh, that is for ants. Wiki Voyage. That's not going to give me the full thing. I doubt they have it. Yes, Wikipedia. Okay, let's just open it. We're now fully committed to the subject. This, yeah, I guess this is good. Oh, that is good. All right, so as you can see here, it spans the entire range that we're talking about. Because remember, the Portuguese they found, which again is a proxy for the Iberians, they found them connected with these Central Eastern French, and then Northern Austrians and Southern Czechians, you see? As those proper yellow square with a triangle, as they show up on both the map and this plot here. So they are at the end of the Rhine. You see, they're over, I could put it on the top of the screen. That's where they are, over there in that range. And so this span, this is a continuum. This is a genetic continuum. And basically what happened that we can see from all these studies put together, and this is what this channel is all about, ladies and gentlemen, is to put these ideas together and find the conclusions of what they mean. Basically, this means that the Bell Beakers, they migrated as a whole set of peoples, a whole span of peoples, different peoples, from the Netherlands to the northern part of the Alps, the pre-Alps and the Alps themselves. They migrated west sort of in a ranged way. In other words, they went sideways here from this whole range as they colonized, northwestern Europe. So colonized both the British Isles and Ireland, and then the northern part of France, mostly above the 49th parallel, but again, I haven't shown you that evidence, but we'll come to it later. And then south of the 49th parallel, so like Paris, and then south of that more or less, that's where the South Bell Beakers that David Reich shows us were matching genomically and autosomally the Spaniards. So again, as a proxy for Iberians, all Iberians. So basically from this eastern part of Spain, Central Eastern, above Switzerland, and Switzerland itself, so very much the pre-Alp region and the Alps, they migrated west into southern France, southern Gaul, or maybe before southern Gaul. They migrated to southern France and into Iberia and all the way to Portugal. So they migrated in a ranged motion like this, almost perfectly sideways. They were these two peoples with the focus, one in Netherlands, the other in Switzerland. And they went west as they populated the western part of Europe over the megalithic farmers that were there before these Bell Beakers. Okay, and that's why today the Iberians still cluster with the French and Swiss, and not with the Italians, as we can see even better when we make a plot of their genetic distances. Okay, so the Iberians are actually Central European people. They are the southernmost Central European people, but still Northern Alpine. They're still north of the Alps. So they do not cluster with Italians. You see? And so that also, even this study comments on, let me find that again. The study says, I don't remember reading this yesterday, but I might, but I'll read it again. It starts from here. In this MDS analysis, which by the way, this graph is an MDS. So they took an MDS of the F3 statistics, okay? Because you can take an MDS of many things. And also they could have taken a PCA of it, and it would have shown very much similar to this, and not similar to a PCA that comes from the SNP, the SNP comparisons, which then amplify differences, I suppose. So this amplifies a similarity. So it shows us the similarity between the groups. And then in this case, I think much like TS&E, if I'm not mistaken, the distances are not meaningful. They don't mean anything. They just mean that there's a gap, but cannot quantify or use the quantity of the distances to conclude anything. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. But where were we here? We were going to... I think we were finishing the point that the label, these labels, therefore, Belgic and Celtic, were applied first by George Buchanan, because he was identifying what is now identified by David Reich and also by these other papers that I showed you, that since the Bronze Age and then going through the Iron Age and then up to today, these people form two poles of a spectrum. The spectrum is the Bell-Beaker spectrum. It was created then. We could also call it the Rhenish spectrum, because or continuum, because it goes from the northern part of the Rhine to the southern part of the Rhine, specifically. And these two poles could be defined by Britain and Portugal, for instance. You could pick. And I believe Portugal is even a very apt choice here, because they are not as Basque as the Spanish, and so they're more Central European. Actually, if the Basques were here, they would have gone further. This is not south. Well, this is south. Yeah, they would have gone further to the west here, I believe. Yeah, like one of these circles with the X that is very much projected more to the west of this whole range, of this whole continuum. And then one of these squares, the yellow squares with the triangle, is also projected more westward. I believe that's more or less where the Basques would be. But the point is that Portugal ends up being a good pole to refer to between Portugal and Britain for the two poles, or you can use the Spanish as well, but for the two poles that are this that form this Bell-Beaker spectrum. Okay, and so these people are the Bell-Beaker up to today. We can find them in this spectrum, organized this way, and so forever they will be. You know, George Buchanan thought that they were the Belgics and the Celtics, but the point is that forever the Celts and the Celtic label is associated with the bottom part of this range from Britain to Portugal, Metatron. And we don't have a good name for them today, but I would also defend Buchanan's choice to call these Belgic peoples, which would include the Britons and the Gaelics, that they are the northern part, so the second half of these Bell-Beakers. I would propose that those would be good terms. And I would actually back up Buchanan's choice to call them Belgic languages and Celtic languages, Belgic on the north, Celtic on the south, and call these cultures that way, and then call the grouping Gallic, because it's more historically accurate. After all, the Gauls as a name was distributed all the way from north to south, and so historically it did apply to peoples who were from both parts of this range, from both poles of this Britain to Portugal range, from the Bell-Beaker spectrum. Okay. Whereas the Celts, I'm going to show this much later, not today, but I have a whole study on that. The Celts are really referred to as people from Iberia, mostly in the Greco-Roman writings, and people in the southern part of Gaul. And even there's a passage, I'll show you later, that Strabo says that it's only the southern Gauls who are the Celts, and the northern Gauls are not the Celts. Maybe I'll find that now. I will take a small break, and then I will come back with that passage from Strabo, so we can look at what Strabo said about it. I believe Siculus also said something about it, and maybe I'll bring that as well. And then we'll go over it when I'm back. So it'll be a small 5-minute break, and then I'll be right back. Oh, right. We're back. I actually remember where I was. We were talking about the conclusion that the article drew from the fact that they found this continuum here, this genetic continuum from Britain to Portugal. And so let's finish that up, and then we'll go to Strabo and Diodorus Siculus. So what I was reading started from here. It goes, in this MDS analysis, which is this, that's why I was there. This MDS, by the way, on the left, of course, okay? What says Twig Stats F3 statistics, that's an MDS analysis of Twig Stats F3 statistics. It goes, in this MDS analysis, we note a close affinity of wide-ranging individuals from Portugal, France, Germany, Austria, and Britain. We hypothesize that this corresponds to areas associated with the Celtic-speaking world, and that their close genetic affinity is due to earlier expansions. So this Metatron is now an academic publication giving some backing to explaining the Bell-Beaker, what we're calling Bell-Beaker genetic continuum. By the way, this is from the Iron Age, okay? Even though there are modern labels here, and we could always say, oh, but there wasn't a Portugal in the modern in the Iron Age. It's like, okay, but there was the territory, and labels can be anachronistic. It's all right. There's not a label police, at least for just offhandedly referring to them like this, to facilitate. But of course, it would be better if these were the actual people. I think that they're trying to clarify here, and so because the territories, he's talking about the territories, so he's being particularly careful to purposely apply these labels to what otherwise are Iron Age samples. So we should keep that in mind, that despite the modern labels, these labels are really just referring to regions or territories. They are geographical labels. That's why, for instance, Scandinavian Peninsula, now that I see. Yeah, so that's the clue. So there's nothing wrong with these labels here. And now I am being the label police, and I think that there is some policing that is necessary, said the Celt. And maybe the Swiss will get that joke. They say that they are all police. And so now let me take my police cap off, and then the point that we were making here is that there is some backing for the characterization of this Iron Age detected genetic spectrum as being due to Celtic speakers. Okay, so they are all still connected with that history. That's another point, Metatron, that I wanted to make, is that, and I haven't talked about how I learned all of this at first, growing up from school, but many people are taught that Iberians, or at least, if not altogether, at least partially Roman, because of the supposed settling of the Romans in Iberia and their proper conquest, which did happen, and overall because of how they overpowered Iberia. But it turns out that the Iberians did not become Romans, and then we can talk about later if they do have some autosomal Roman. It'll be nothing that moves them towards nothing that moves them to become together with the Italian cluster, to become clustered together with Italians. The Iberians are going to be always clustering with Central Italians. I'm so sorry, with Central Europeans, okay, like the French and the Swiss specifically. And we can look later at other genetic distance studies that there are, that they found the same thing. One of them is actually the this one, but it's in the supplementary material, but then they forgot to include the supplementary material that is the sheets. What are they called? The Excel sheets that they have. And so I have to find that link elsewhere, and then I have that link somewhere here, and then I'll find that later. But now I was going to go to Strabo and Siculus, so let's go to a quick break and I'll come back with those passages. All right, I have it now, and we're back. Let me go ahead and start with the Siculus. So the citation, I'm gonna put it here, is going to be that's where we're going, or 532.1. So Diodorus Siculus 532.1. So let's go to 32. Here it is, and 1 is right there. So here's what it says. It says, "And now it will be useful to draw a distinction which is unknown to many. The peoples who dwell in the interior above Massalia," Massalia, by the way, is a shore, is a coastal city. Of course, it's Marseille, right? And let's verify that. Cue the song. No, there we go. See? And so it's got a port, and so it's a coastal city. And so the peoples who dwell in the interior above Massilia, well, there's no choice but to dwell above Massilia, right? Because otherwise, below Massilia is the ocean. And so basically these are the immediately southern Gauls that he's talking about. So the peoples who dwell in the interior above Massilia, so the immediately southern Gauls, right above the southern shores of Gaul, and plus those on the slopes of the Alps, which is in, as far as France is concerned, the southern half of France, and those on this side of the Pyrenees Mountains, which is also, as far as France is concerned, southern France, are called Celts. So he's saying in this part that the southern Gauls are called Celts, whereas the peoples who are established above this land, okay, so above these Celts, above this land of Celtica, in the parts which stretch to the north, so because when you go and look at the original Greek, this above could be ambiguous. I think there's an ambiguity there. But he then says in the parts which stretch to the north, so it cuts off any ambiguity. That means it is from above these southern Celts onwards northward, both along the ocean and along the Hercynian mountains. And all the peoples who come after these must be eastward, right? Because westward would be, again, the Channel and the Atlantic Ocean. And then he tells us for sure it's eastward, because as far as Scythia, those are known as Gauls, which the original of this is Galatas, right? The Gauls here is a modern term. There's no such thing as Gauls when Diodorus Siculus was writing. This is Galatas, okay? And we'll see that when we read Strabo. He will that will have been translated as Galatas indeed. But then check this out. Let's continue. The Romans, however, include all these nations together under a single name, calling them one and all Gauls. Which then, by the way, the Greeks do the opposite and call them all Keltoi. So Metatron, the point here is that, and I'm going to continue making this point with Strabo shortly, but the point here is that at least from Siculus we can tell that they did know that there was a difference between them, and this difference I will defend again. It's simply the Belgic versus Celtic. It's the British versus Spaniard, okay? It's the northern versus southern in the Bell-Beaker genetic continuum. That's what these Greeks are detecting, and Romans. That's what they're detecting, okay? And so that's why they felt, I believe, need to separate them in two. Okay, that's what Siculus is doing here. And the two are north and south. And so to Siculus, what Buchanan named Belgic and Celtic, to Siculus are Galatas and Celts. So this goes again to show that all of this Celtic thing, it was always ever the southwestern part of Europe. It was never meant for the northwestern part of Europe. And this is before this whole language nomenclature, okay? And very interestingly, although we know it's not Gaul, they did choose something else other than Celts for what would be both. So in their minds, oh no, actually, I'm sorry, no, I'm not correct there, because to them the Gauls were the northern ones, and then the Celts were the southern ones, but they didn't have a name for both of them. The Romans generalized Gauls, Galli, and the Greeks generalized Celts, Keltoi. But as you can see, and I will pick up a part from the video that you've just made that makes that point, but I don't know if I know where it is exactly. Oh, actually, I did write it down. Yeah, it's an 82-minute timestamp mark. And we'll go there, and you make that point much better than I can make it now, Metatron. But basically the point being that there is such a thing as choosing one name that you're going to be forced to choose among the existing ones to then become the generalized name for a group of people that you perceive as being easily grouped, you see? And so that's why, interestingly, the Romans picked Gauls and the Greeks picked Celts. So you can see that right there, and by the way, the Romans picking Gauls is picking Galli here specifically. And by the way, right there it shows that these two peoples were seen as different, and that these labels are arbitrary. And so they are so arbitrary that the Romans picked one label, Galli, and the Greeks picked another, the ancient Romans and ancient Greeks, respectively. The Greeks picked Celts. What is interesting here is that, let's suppose that we had also, that the Greeks and the Romans had also made Galatai or Galli more famous a name than Celts. Then perhaps George Buchanan, instead of Belgic and Celtic, would have picked Belgic and Gallic, and then perhaps he would have picked, some other name for the both of them together, for the grouping of them. And then again, we would have been nowadays talking about the Irish and the Scottish Gaelic as if they were Gallic instead. And now let me go to the point that you made, Metatron, because you make that point actually. But it was this video. And let's go to that mark, which 82 minutes will be 122, I believe, but so it should be here. But let me check that on my computer first, because then I will put it on the exact timestamp. Let me copy this, and let me go ahead and find this here. Put my headphones on. But I think that's where it's going to be. Like 122 maybe. And if it's not, then I'll never find it again. No, I might find it. Okay, 121.10 is where it starts. So Metatron, I'm just gonna quote you just a little bit here. And then I'll provide commentary as well. But let's hear what you have to say here about the Greeks, because this makes the point that I'm making.
So yeah. And the Greeks, don't forget the Greeks. You know what? About Greeks, I'm going to make a video about why they're called Greeks. Because they're called Greeks due to the way Romans and Etruscans called them. But they didn't call themselves that. They used...
So let's pause there as well. So right there you see that we could then have a name, right, like we call all the Greeks today. But the Greeks didn't call themselves that. So just as that's what's happening to this misconception of Celts. They didn't all call themselves Celts then, just because today we arbitrarily labeled their languages Celtic languages. You see? There's no causation from the modern day age or from the 18th century to then cause something in the past. That doesn't mean just because we chose the name Celtic languages that they called it themselves all Celts. Some of them did, which we saw yesterday, and I'll go over that again for Metatron here probably. Some of them did, and so just like you're going to make the point that some of the Greeks did call themselves Greeks, but not all of them, that exact same situation happened with the Celts. Why wouldn't it have happened with the Celts? They're not a special people, okay? And it didn't come from nothing. It wasn't that the Greeks, oh, they had a name called Celt, a word called Celt that meant barbarian. That didn't actually happen. And I'll show you a passage later on that wasn't the case, okay? Exactly the same that you're going to say happened to the Greeks happened to the Celts. They picked one name and generalized it. And I'm going to actually show here Strabo making that exact point. That's the perfect time to show this. And so let me go ahead and grab that. He's going to make that exact point. How's that for commentary over your video? We're going to go to another page entirely. And we're going to find here. Here it is. This then, so this is now the conclusion. By the way, where is it that we are? We are on Strabo Geographica, or the geography of Strabo. And this is book 4, chapter 1. All right. And we're going to go all the way to 66. Says halfway through. This then, so he's concluding this entire chapter that was about the Celts. This then is what I have to say about the people who inhabit the dominion of Narbonites. So that's the Gallia Narbonensis, which is the southern part of Gaul, whom the men of former times named Celtae. So he's saying that in former times, it was the Narbonites who were called Celtae, not anybody else, okay, in Gaul. And then he goes on, and it was from the Celtae, so these Celtae from Narbonites, from Narbonenses, he says, I think, it was from the Celtae, I think, that the Galatae as a whole, so here now he's invoking this Galatae as the name for both of them, for both these groups that these people saw, okay? And now it's interesting that's what I was going with in the other thinking, is that perhaps to these ancient Greeks and Romans, okay, the overarching term for both these groups, the northern Western Europeans and the southern Western Europeans, the overarching name probably was Galatae. And then the northern ones were Galli, as Siculus told us, and the southern ones were Celts. Nevertheless, the Celts for sure were always associated with the southern ones, as you can see even from here. Let's continue. And it was from the Celtae, again from this southern part of Gaul, I think, says Strabo, that the Galatae as a whole were by the Greeks called Celtae. You see, so now he's making the point on the other side. Siculus told us what the Romans called both of them, and now Strabo is telling us what the Greeks called both of them. But he's being very clear that it was on account of the fame of the Celtae. Or it may also be that the Massiliates, so now he's using here Massiliates as a synonym of Celtae, as well as other Greek neighbors, contributed to this result on account of their proximity. So again, he's very clearly associating the Celtae with the southern Gauls, and then to him, all of them together in Gaul, which apparently are just two peoples, so because they're Celtae and then the not Celtae, that he groups implicitly here, both of them together are the Galatae, okay? But if we take from Siculus on the other passage, then the northern ones are the Galli, which I'm not sure. I think that Galli is parallel or coordinated with the Greek Galatae, and so I'm not sure, but they are different, of course, because one has a T and one doesn't. But I'm not sure, in other words, that the Greeks had a direct translation of the word, of the Roman word Galli, corresponding to these Gauls, or to the Galians. We also have that in modern English, corresponding to these Galians who were in Gaul, or who were in Gallia, right? To use the ancient term. I'm not sure that the Greeks actually had a Galli. I think for them it's just Galatae. regardless, and we don't get that from Strabo, regardless, we could modernly say that it is Gallians in the, or Gallians in the north. Gallians, I believe it would be properly pronounced, Gallians. Gallian. Gallians in the north, let me show you that. So this term is obsolete, but we could revive it. Gallian is used to mean Gallic or French, but we could use it to mean these northern Gauls and the British Islanders in terms of ethnicity. And that's the British, genetic pool that the researcher David Reich found that I played just now, and it's the British poll that other study found from the Iron Age, and David Reich found from the Bronze Age that the other study from the Iron Age said persists up to the modern day. Okay, so there are these two poles, but definitely the southern pole was in the mind of the Greco-Romans as being the Celts. Okay, this makes it clear. And it was the northern pole that was considered Galli, and then both of them perhaps Galatae. We could consider that. That would be a better naming insofar as the history goes, right? That would be a better, more accurate naming. And then I will show you up above a little bit that he does make that point again. I do think that I have the specific place here. Let me open this up. Let's go to... This whole thing is 4-1. So let me see here, because I do have a note that in 1 there is something, but I'm not sure. Check this out also. This is now 4-1-4. The Aquitani, they said, are wholly different, not only in respect to their language, but also in respect to their physique. They're more like the Iberians than the Galatae. So again, he doesn't say Celts here. So this implicitly, believe it or not, is grouping Iberians with Celts, because he's saying that the Galatae is the term that he used for both of them, right? Both of the northern Gauls and the southern Gauls down below where we just saw. But now he's clearly using this for the northern Gauls, right? While the rest of the inhabitants are Galactic in appearance, although not all speak the same language. So again, he didn't say Celtic in appearance here. He made sure to take a term that could only mean the northern ones. So he's saying that even the Celts have this Galactic appearance, which again, we could defend by the fact that they do group with Central Europeans. So perhaps they had a keener eye that they didn't associate simply, oh, Iberians are Southern Europeans and so they must be some sort of Italian. No, they saw them for what they were, and for what they still are today, which is this sort of a Central European. Okay, let's continue here. So they grouped them with the Galactic, with the British in terms of appearance, and not so much with the Aquitani, which indeed, the Aquitani today being represented by the Basques, they are around 25% Yamnaya, and the rest of the Iberians are between 29 and 31% Yamnaya. So there is a difference of around 4 to 6% between the Basques in the Iron Age represented by the Aquitani and the Iberians, the rest of the Iberians, so the Spanish and the Portuguese, that have between 29 and 31% Yamnaya. That would contribute to them possibly being grouped with all the Galatae, so everybody else in Gaul. As an argument, we do that with the French today, right? They're all French. Nevertheless, they still span this genetic continuum. And also, they would have been more familiar with everybody close to the Alps, all these Gaulish tribes close to the Alps, like the Helvetians and the Sequani, and they would have known that the Iberians are very much like them due to that familiarity that not a lot of people today have, to know that they actually are very much Central Europeans in appearance. So they would have that more, and that's why he's being very careful here to associate, when he needs, differences and similarities with the northern part of the northern Gauls, that he for which he then uses the term Galactic. Okay. Let's continue here. Furthermore, their governments are different. Okay, and so now here's another part that I need to show. And this is also interesting. He defines, I suppose, Celtica as being bound in the west by the Pyrenees. And on the east by the Rennes River, which is just southwest of the Alps. And so to him it seems that Celtica is more properly the southern part of Gaul. And he actually makes that point much more clearly. It's coming up here soon, but let me see before that. So then by Aquitani, they meant the people who occupy the northern parts of the Pyrenees. And from the country of the Cevennes, those are the Cévennes mountains, onto the ocean, so that means central France or central Gaul southward. The parts this side of the Garumna River. Oh, this is so I have to pause here. So let me try and read this again. So then by Aquitani, they meant the people who occupy the northern parts of the Pyrenees, and from the country that came onto the ocean, the parts this side of the Garumna River. West, I suppose. By Celtite, they meant the people whose territories extend in the other direction, down to the sea. It's because for them it was a little bit different. They thought that the Pyrenees went north-south. Okay, so we have to make that adaptation. But nevertheless, it does make it clear. By Celtite, they meant the peoples whose territory extends in the other direction, down to the sea that is about Massilia and Narbo, and also joins some of the Alpine mountains. And also we can assume here, Metatron, if you allow me, in the other direction from what? From these, from the center of Gaul, okay? Because it's the Cévennes mountains, okay? So basically, again here, he's saying that the southern part that goes from the Cévennes mountains all the way, extending the territory down in the other direction, down to the sea that is about Massilia and Narbo, that those are the Celts. And he's even telling us by Celtite, that's what they meant. Who is they here? I believe Caesar, because he's going to come up here soon. I mean, not this Caesar, the one before. I believe he means this Julius Caesar. Let me see here. But I'm not... Because he talks about the renaming of these regions. So, but I'm not sure who he's actually talking about here. They. Yeah, I think it is Caesar because he talks about deified Caesar here. Oh, yes. Thus the deified Caesar also has put it in his commentary. So all of this is by Caesar. So he's telling us what Caesar actually meant. This is Strabo. And if he's not contemporary with Caesar, he's right after. And so Strabo is telling us that Caesar meant by Celts, when he made his divisions, territorial divisions, he meant these southern Gauls. He's making it very clear here. And then he tells us that there was a difference when Augustus came in power after Caesar, that his naming of Gaulish regions, Gallic regions, changed. And because we all know that what Caesar named Celtica was Gallia Lugdunensis, which I'll show you here quickly. Was this division here, and went all the way up to northwestern Gaul. And started in the Cévennes mountains, but then went up. But Strabo is saying that actually Caesar knew who the Celts were, and it weren't these people. And his naming was incorrect. Let's go to where he tells us that the naming was incorrect, because he tells us that after Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, however, so it's a contraposition here to the point that he just made with the deified Julius Caesar, okay? Augustus, however, divided Transalpine Celtica into 4 parts. The Celtae he designated as belonging to the province of Narbonensis, which is the southern part. So actually he's telling us that the but I don't have it here, right? I closed it. That it was the southern part of this territory of Gaul that was named. So that southern part right there. Let me see if I can open it. Yeah, that southern little piece of Gaul there looks more or less like a motorcycle. Is Narbonitis, how Strabo calls it, but more properly Gallia Narbonensis. That's what Augustus, after Julius Caesar, called Celtica. So again, let's go back to what he's saying. He's telling us this. The Celta he designated as belonging to the province of Narbonensis. That's Augustus after Caesar. Okay? The Aquitani, and then so on and so forth. So the other peoples he designated to other parts, but the Celts were in the south. And he's telling us that even the deified Julius Caesar actually meant by Celtae the people in the south. Okay? So there is no doubt to these Greco-Romans, and I could go on with other passages, but I'm going to try and keep short each one, and then on later videos we'll do a deep dive on each of these tangents. But the point here is that for the Greco-Romans, the ancient chroniclers of Greco-Roman times, they did know indeed that the Celts in Gaul were the southern Galatae. Okay? The southern Galactic people, the southern Gauls, as we might call them today. And then the northern ones, they variously tried to call them Galli or Galatae. They kept trying to find another name, but they knew that there were 2 peoples there in Gaul. That's one of the main points that I want to make here. Okay? They knew that there were 2 peoples in Gaul, ethnically. And one is the British and the other one is the Spanish. And all of that is illustrated from the Bronze Age through the Iron Age to the modern day, going through the 16th century, when in 1582 George Buchanan for the first time detected a Belgic people and surmised from their tongue separate from a Celtic people's tongue. And the Belgic tongue he associated with northern Gaul going into the British Isles all the way to Ireland. And the Celtic tongue he associated with the southern part of Gaul going into Iberia, to Celtiberia, and beyond. He also tells us that there were Celtic tribes in Portugal. I'll show that in another video when we do a deep dive on his writings, okay? Because it's hard to find quickly. There's not a good search mode. Or there is, but I don't trust it. So I'll show you later how he even talks about the Lusitanian tribes as being Celts. So they had a very good knowledge that Celts, and by they now I mean everybody going all the way to the 16th century at least, before this whole thing got confused with the Irish and the Scots and so on being labeled Celtic speakers, and then they thought that that meant that because they speak Celtic language that they are the Celts. Before this whole thing got confused, everyone in the world associated Celts with southwestern Europe. And when talking about Gaul, they associated with the southern part of Gaul. Okay? So this should make it clear, Metatron, that regardless of what that study finds about these bones, the Irish are clearly the Belgic or Gallic or Galatic Gauls, but they're not the Celtic Gauls. So they're never going to be the Celts, because they weren't called by this name Celts by the Greco-Romans, and they also did not call themselves Celts, as we saw in the first stream, as I'll show again today. And maybe I'll show again today with some more evidence from other scholars saying it out loud, written out, that no one in the British Isles has ever called themselves Celts. Okay, so the point is the word Celt was always ever associated with southwestern Europeans. And so it doesn't matter what that study tells us, because these southwestern Europeans were always, ever since the Belgica expansion, this Spanish-like group in genetic ethnicity. And then it was the northern ones who were this British-like group. Then the Irish can only ever be like the British. They can never be like the Celts, because they are two different groups in Gaul, and then outside of Gaul in Britain and the Iberian Peninsula, respectively. You see the point that I'm making? And so none of that actually makes sense. It doesn't even make sense to discuss whether the Irish were Celts or not before making the clarification that the word Celts came from the southwestern Europeans, was about the southwestern Europeans, and even when it was used as Celtic speakers to impute that term onto the northwestern Europeans, nevertheless it was a reference to southwestern Europeans as the Celtiberi and the Celtic of Spain, and the Celti of Spain, as Buchanan put it. Okay, so that label was always, ever, and only ever about southwestern Europeans. So because of that, we can't say, oh, today Scottish people and Irish people speak Celtic languages, therefore we're going to call them Celts. Well, what if we had gone with Buchanan's labeling instead of Paul Eves Pesbon labeling, when Lewid made that choice? Then you would be defending that the Irish and the Scottish, because they speak a Gallic language, therefore they're Gallians, or therefore they're Gauls, if you want to use the modern term. And again, we would be having this discussion, perhaps because of the fact that Siculus agrees that Galli are perhaps the northern ones, then maybe he would agree with you then. If you were calling the Irish and the Scottish Gaelic languages Gallic, they would probably agree with you, okay? But they wouldn't agree with you if you're calling them Celtic today, because they would have told you that the Celts are the southern ones out of this Western European range from Britain through Gaul into the Iberian Peninsula. They would have told you these ancient peoples, if you took a time machine, they would have told you, no, it's the southern ones of that range that we call Celts, that call themselves Celts. The northern ones don't do that. They never call themselves Celts. We don't call themselves Celts. We don't call them Celts. I mean, they would have told you we try to call them maybe Galli, or maybe Gallic, or Galatic, or Galatai, but we don't call them Celts. So I really wanted to illustrate that discussion is so missing a foundational knowledge about why is it that those things are at all called Celts? Why is it that the name Celt is at all in a discussion about Irish bones? You see what I mean, Metatron? It's hopefully I disentangled this a little bit, but the main point is that Celtic was only ever a term for southwestern Europe. That includes all of Iberia, and I say that because there were even small colonies where the Iberian-speaking Iberians were in the eastern shores of Iberia, and today they're all co-ethnics anyway. There's not like two ethnicities there. Maybe you can say that the Basques are the Iberians, but otherwise all Spanish and Portuguese would be Celts. These Celts started in Iberia and went all the way up to the Cevennes Mountains, so more or less central, where the Arverni were, and up to central France, and perhaps from central France, exclusive to the north, and then into Britain. That's where the second people were that these ancient peoples would have told you that they would have detected this ethnic difference. But they definitely weren't calling. They were not calling the northwestern Europeans Celts. That's something that only started with Buchanan in 1582, so the 16th century. And he was talking only about languages, and all these other peoples that came after him in the 18th century were also only talking about language. So these people are Celtic speakers, but they're not Celtic. And in the past there were Celtic speakers who weren't Celtic, like the Treveri, who they thought of themselves as Germani, like a Germanic people, and the Ligurians, they ended up learning Celtic, and but they were still Ligurians. Nobody thought that they were a Celtic people just because they spoke Celtic. And also the Etruscans ended up learning Etruscan in Rhaetia, in the northern part of their territories. And so we and the Greco-Romans spoke of them as Celticized peoples, but they never said that they were Celts. They did say that they spoke Celtic, but that in their eyes did not make those people Celts. So it would also be anachronistic. In other words, it would be wrong with respect to time that we would call people who speak Celtic languages Celts, because that was never how the term was utilized. Even the Greco-Romans of ancient times did not call people Celts just because they spoke Celtic. And we know that from existing examples, again, as I said, like the Ligurians and the Treveri, who they spoke of as being respectively Ligurians and Germanic, and not Celtic just because they spoke Celtic. So speaking a Celtic language would not make someone Celtic. I actually have something that I can show for that. I will see if I can find it now, and I will also use this opportunity to take a small break. And then after this nice elevator music, I'll be right back with that. All right, I found a video. I did not find a part yet that I want to show you, but there's so many good parts that I actually will show you the video. Now I hope that they will not do a copyright claim on it. I will be providing ample commentary, but I believe it is worth it to try and play this, and then perhaps I'll monitor if there's a copyright claim or something like that. So let me copy this, and then hold on a moment. Just see here if there's any activity. No, there's no one in the chat. All right. So let's go ahead and put this on here. And then I'll monitor here if there's a problem. And this is the Royal Archaeological Institute. So I really do hope that they won't copyright strike me, because I really want to provide some commentary on their video here. I believe we could start at 4:56 perhaps. Let's do that. Actually, let me just see what he says before this. And we might start a little bit earlier. And I know that it's the audio is not perfectly tethered here in a way that would go with my streaming rig. Not sure if I could fix that. Let me see here if there's a way to quickly fix that. Oh, but I would have to install a driver. Okay, we'll do that later. Yeah, we would have to install a driver. So I'll try and get it captured by the microphone at the same time, because I do think it captures a little bit, and I think that'll be enough for now.
You can sometimes convert people's ideas. And so there is a name for this idea. It's called Celto-skepticism. It's nothing to do with Euroscepticism.
Yeah, so this is a new idea that I'm not sure if I'm going to represent it perfectly, and maybe that's what this video is all about, but I believe it includes the idea that we should not be using the name Celt to represent these Northwestern European peoples, and he's going to make at least the beginning of this point here.
Those of us who are writing about the Celts and who are put under this label, we're in fact very pro-Celtic, and Patrick Sims Williams, the man who invented the term and or introduced it into the literature, and is the president of the International Congress of Celtic Studies. He openly admits that he is now a Celto-skeptic.
So the president of the International Congress of Celtic Studies, Patrick Sims Williams, now says that he's a Celto-skeptic. Therefore, he agrees with some of the points that John Collis is going to make here.
So it's becoming all rather official. But I'm sort of gradually moving around looking at problems in various cases. And in this particular case, what has caused me to prepare this particular lecture is looking at Dan Snow. I think it was something like how the Celts saved Britain or something of this sort. One of the interesting things, if you look at all of his programs, he doesn't use the word Celt once. And
so now he's making the point that some educators of British history no longer use the word Celtic. Again, it's because these things don't apply to Northwestern Europe. It has nothing to do with politics or right versus left. This is only a technical thing. Okay, this is the point that I'm making.
So I contacted him about this, and he said, well, I know that people say there weren't any Celts. It was the program makers who insisted it should be in the title. And the Celts are going to be with us for a long time yet, don't worry. But it's led on to a whole series of sort of problems of looking at what we actually mean by Celtic.
And so this is going to get straight to your point, Metatron, about Celtic culture. He's going to make that point. We're almost getting there. It's going to be around 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So within 2 minutes or so. But I want to read out what are some of the questions that he has on this slide. He goes, the Celts and Celtoskepticism. How do we define a Celt? Why are Celtic languages called Celtic? This I have just answered in this stream, okay? Why are Scots, Irish, Welsh, and Bretons called Celts? This he will answer in 2 minutes, okay? It'll be a very brief answer. What is Latin culture and why is it equated with Celtic? This is something that then Patrick Sims Williams in his paper, Celtic from the... it's called An Alternative to Celtic from the East and Celtic from the West. On that paper, he argues the Latin culture was not exactly only Celtic, or we cannot make that equation. Why do we think, or maybe he makes that point for Hallstatt, why do we think the Celts originate from southern Germany or from southwest Iberia? And why is Celtic art called Celtic? Okay, he's going to answer that very soon here. It's going to be the exact answer I'm giving you, that all these names came from the fact that the languages were named that, okay? And so this is going to be important for you, Metatron, because you should know when you're using that word Celtic culture, that phrase, it doesn't disconnect you from the past. That phrase is still because the Southwestern Europeans call themselves Celts. Okay, so you can't use that word to be like a hazy way of referring to those people and to then give them the name of Celts just because you're defending that, oh, it was a hazy thing, it was a culture. But again, it wasn't a culture. Back then, it wasn't a culture called Celtic. It's only today that the culture back then is called Celtic. And it's only because ultimately the people in the Spanish territory called themselves Celts. That's why those things are called Celtic. Okay, so let's continue here.
How we define them. Who were they? Where do they come from? And I make a big division between the ancient Celts, and I'll be looking at the very end of that in this talk, and the modern Celts, who appear 1,000 years later after the ancient Celts.
So again, but this distinction is still not good enough, because no one called all these people Celts. And by the way, this range of peoples is exactly the range that we find here. Where is it? Here. That's the exact range, as you can see. But no, these people did not all call themselves Celts. And I suppose now is a good time to make a quick point to Metatron. Where is the... here it is. So Metatron, here is a epigraphic database, okay? It's called the Epigraphy Database Klaus Schlaby. Okay, and I searched for where the text is Celts, the text of the inscription, of the epigraphy, okay, of the epigraphic evidence, whatever it is, okay. I searched for the ones that have these four letters, Celts. And basically, the results find them mostly, I showed this yesterday, the results find them mostly in Iberia. Okay, and this is a database for the entirety of Europe. And so the results, if I put Lusitania here, you can see by the right side here on the scroll bar how many it finds. And then I'll show you the Hispania results. And also you can see that it's 34 for Hispania, and you can see that it's all over. For Lusitania, it is 27, okay? And let's grab Gallia, for instance, Gallia. Look at how few. There's only 6. And they're all in Gallia Narbonensis, all in the southern Gallia, you see? So this is now corroborating what Siculus and Strabo said that we just saw, that the Celts are these peoples in the southern part of Gaul. And then in other passages they say that they're also in Iberia. Okay, we didn't see that. But you see how many times it shows Hispania, it shows Lusitania, and let's see Thracia, how many times it shows for Thrace. Whoops. Only shows twice. Britannia, it shows here. How many times it shows for Britannia? Only once. Pannonia. Once. And this is the first page. Oh, Rome. Roma. Shows 13 times. Okay. And this is for the first page. Let's go to the next page. I think we have 3 pages. Oh, no, we said 50. But, yeah, but I do think that they said 3 pages before. And let's see on the second page, Hispania, how many times it shows. It shows many times, maybe not in the center here. What is showing in the center here? Belgica. So Belgica is showing up several times here, but it's only 8. And then we have Gallia. Oh, but we have Lugdunensis, I believe. Lugudunensis, okay. So Lugudunensis appears 4 times. Belgica appears 8 times, okay? And then Hispania appears 25 times. And Lusitania appears 27 times, okay? So always Iberia appears more, you see? And I showed yesterday, I'm not going to go into them, but basically the ones from Britain, for instance, they're referring to Celt-Iberians. So they're not really of peoples from there. Let me see if there's one here that I can show. As an example, as a quick example. Oh, but because I resized the page, then it doesn't show me the pop-up. Yeah. And I can't resize this because then it's gonna, let me see if I can take the zoom away. Yeah, here we go. So here we go. So here, now I'm gonna try to zoom back. So you see how this is from Britannia, in Brompton, in the province of Britannia, right? And it talks about Celt-Iberians. You see, it goes on and on. It's like a roster of all of the soldiers, the cohorts, military soldiers that they had. Okay, and so in a mention of Celts, this is about Celts not from Britannia. So we shouldn't pay too much attention. But in another stream, we're gonna go through all of these inscriptions from outside of Iberia. But right now, suffice it to say, they're not really about people there. And then yesterday we saw that the other ones, there's no context for them. They just show, this is another one I'm going to show you where it appears here. See, it's Celt-Iberians again. So even when it appears in Britannia, it's about Celt-Iberians. Let me show you another one. Because then you'll see that it also, many times it shows without any context. Here, like this. No context whatsoever. So we don't know if this is from, and this could be a fragment of a clay tablet. So we don't even know what they were talking about. It could have been the Celt-Iberians, could have been Celts from elsewhere. This in no way says that there were people speaking, calling themselves Celts in Britannia. Well, at least not in a settled way. Of course, someone went there, but more likely than not, it was a Celt-Iberian cohort. And but the point here that I'm making now is to show you that places in Iberia show up a lot more for the search of the name Celt in inscriptions, in epigraphic inscriptions, than do for Britannians or anywhere else that is in Iberia. Okay, so Hispania once again 25 times here, Lusitania 27 times, and we'll go to the third page. I believe it's the last one. Yes, and then it shows Hispania and also an uncertain province. And then to finish making that point, I will go to this paper. It's called the Paleo-Hispanic Onomastic, the anthroponymy and theonymy of Paleo-Hispanic Onomastic. And this is by Vallejo, and he has also published something on the epigraphic evidence from Lusitania, and he finds in that book that it was essentially the Lusitanians who call themselves Celti and Celtius, and peoples around them call themselves Celtici and other names with other suffixes. So it shows us, and this I'll have to show you later, but it shows us that there was a focus of people calling themselves Celts exactly in Lusitania, and they were there mining tin. That's where their main activity. But anyway, let me show you this paper here, because this goes to show us the quantity actually of people calling themselves Celts in Hispania, in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, if I search for Celt here, we have 371 results. Let me show you what this paper actually is. It's really just a bunch of tables. There's a little bit of a commentary here in the beginning about 14 pages, maybe 20 pages, some commentary, and then it says from page 23 onwards of 552 pages, the list of peoples. So on page 25 we start with this, and it's going to be like this all the way to page 521. Okay, so the document is essentially just a bunch of lists, and then there's like some footnotes, closing remarks, and then there's some opening remarks as well. And it doesn't mean that it shows 371 times in epigraphic evidence, because of the fact that when it does show here, it's duplicated sometimes. For instance, this is not duplicated. Okay, this is a different one. Although it might be the same. I'm not sure why it's listed twice here. I'm not sure. But I want to show you how some actually show duplicated. So for instance, this only shows once in this entire column, but it doesn't say that it's in the inscription. But most of them are in the inscription. For instance, like this. Okay. And all these places are in Iberia. So see Sunua, a very popular name for women, Celtic women. And so these are not showing up duplicated, but I'm going to show you one place where it does show duplicated, so I can tell you why we can't just go with this number 371. Celtius, this is in Lusitania a lot. Here, this is an example where just for the same inscription, it says it twice, you see? And so because it says it twice for one inscription, we cannot say that because it appears 371 times in this document, they have 371 occurrences. But we could estimate that, let's say that, let's see how many, if we can see for the introduction text, how many times it shows. So it shows 18 times. And let's see for the end here how many times it shows. Okay, so it was this book is so important that we're gonna have to read it soon, this book right here, but it shows 347 to 371 would be plus 3 is 50, and then to 71, 21, so 24. So 24 with 18 would be 20 plus 22, 42. So 371 minus 42, okay? So it's going to be 371 minus 42 would be 28, 29. So 329. Let me verify that. 329 plus 42. Was it 42? Yeah, 371. So 329, we're going to cut that in half. 164. Now, there are also some that talk about it but aren't it. Talk about the inscription but aren't in the inscription, like this one. And let me see how many of these show up, and then we'll minus that from the 164. It shows 11 times. So 164 minus 11, 153. So we could estimate that, and I have the terms to consider that they always show twice on the same, but they don't even show twice. So at least 153 times the stem Celt appears in Iberia, and the results for the other places that we saw in the epigraphic database here are nowhere near in the hundreds. It's not 153. So for Iberia, if we were to count all of them, let's count all of them for Britannia. So that's 4 on this second page, and 1 on the first page. So it only shows 5 times in Britannia, and 2 of them, it's about the Celtiberians, and at least one other is without context. But yesterday we saw that 2 are without context. So 2 are about Celtiberians in Britannia, 2 are without context, and the other one is this one, and it is about the Celtiberians as well. So out of 5 in Britannia, 3 are about Celtiberians, and 2 are completely without context. Okay, now contrast that, Metatron, 5 times only that in the whole of epigraphic evidence in Britannia, Celt shows 5 times only. 3 times it's talking about Celtiberians, whereas in Iberia, it shows up 153 times. You see the comparison that I'm making? Shows up 153 times at least. You know, that's considering that they're always duplicated in mention of Celts, which is not true. So if they were only duplicated for half, maybe 200 times at least, do we have evidence that they use the name Celts for themselves in their own tombstones. These are all mostly tombstones, okay? And you can see all over that they call themselves Celts in many ways. Celti, you see, Celti, Celtica. No, that wasn't Concelti, you see, with prefixes. Celtis Milonis, Latronius Celtiati, different suffixes, okay? Now it does say Celtica, Celtiatis. So at least 153 times. That's estimating. We didn't count them manually, but that's just a rough estimate. So clearly, we did have people calling themselves Celts. They did exist in Iberia, most of all, and they don't seem to exist anywhere else. The evidence for Gallia Narbonensis calling themselves Celts is also very, very small. There's about like 4 or 5. I think we saw some of them here. Was it Gallia that it called? No, sorry, in the other part. In the other document. Shows up 6 times for Gallia Narbonensis. And then the other page, I don't think it had Narbonensis. Yeah, it didn't have it. So 6 times only does it show for Gallia Narbonensis. So again, compare that with 153 times. So clearly the focus of the Celts was in Iberia, and later on I'm going to show that that focus was in Lusitania. Okay, we yesterday showed some documents, Metatron, you might want to see. We actually confirmed that this is true, okay, because this is just some image in some random website, although this website does have some repute to it, does have some good reputation to it. But nevertheless, we did verify that this is true, and that these names, Celts, they majorly focus on this area, which is following the tin mines that start in northern Portugal and then go eastward a bit and then exiting Portugal into the areas of Extremadura in current Spain. So basically, these names without suffix, and I know that US is a suffix, you don't need to correct me, but I'm saying not an extra suffix, because we have these names that we saw, like Celtianus, Celtiati, so there's not an extra N or an extra T. It's just basically finishing up the adjective or the noun in any case. And basically look at where they show. And then you can see the ones with suffix as well, the ones that I call with suffix, like Celtiatus. They all appear in Western Iberia, you see. I also have another piece of evidence. I will show you right now because it's an appropriate time. I will have to take a quick break to find it. But I can show you now how from the scholar who made that paper that we were counting 153 occurrences of Celts in the Iberian Peninsula, then he made a book about Lusitania, and then he finds out that indeed Celtic names, with the stem Celt, they concentrate in Lusitania. And so let me find that, and then I'll show you, because now is the appropriate time, and then I will be right back. All right, I'm back. Unfortunately, I only have the map that I wanted to show you in an overly annotated form or format, but that's all right. And I overly annotated it with what I thought would be the best descriptions for each region. Apparently, I didn't finish it up. I didn't put all regions there. But you'll see what I mean. And also, what I want to do first is I want to find the book to show you that this is from. So this is the book that this is from, that I'm going to show you. Yeah, to me it's like burgundy color, but it's showing golden here. Actually, it's not this one. Hold on, that's not the one. Yeah, this is the one, which is burgundy. Yeah, let me see if this has a bigger picture. There you go. This is the one. So it says Roman Lusitania's indigenous anthroponymy. Okay, so it's the epigraphic evidence of what people called themselves in the Roman Lusitania. Now, the way I think that he made this book, I'm not going to guarantee, but the way it seems to me, which is obvious once you just look at a few pages, is that he first finds the names in Lusitania, and then of course they're not going to appear only in Lusitania, so then he keeps on tracking them everywhere in Iberia, it seems at least. Okay, so that means that we're not going to see only findings within Lusitania exactly, but we're going to see them being marked elsewhere as well in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, just to make it clear. But the focus is what the Lusitanians call themselves. And then I'm going to show you this map that I overly annotated, and we'll see what it looks like. Here you go. Oh, I did annotate all the regions. Okay, yeah. So basically, there's quite a few things going on here. Let me explain little by little. And this is for you too as well, Metatron, for you too. The green part, as opposed to the beige part of Iberia, that's the difference between where Celtic speakers lived and didn't. And so in green is all around where they lived, and blue is green as well in this case. Okay, so everywhere that has these yellow labels, plus this area without the label, which is green, that area being Celt-Iberia, that's all where the Celtic speakers lived. Okay, so in the area where you have the 28 and 29, and then below that where there's no labels, in that green area, that's where the Celt-Iberians would have lived. Okay, they call themselves Celt-Iberians. And everywhere else west of that, where I have labeled Cantabria, Asturias, Galicia, Celtia, Vetonia, and Celtica, those places are where we find people who call themselves Celts by any epigraphic evidence that this book has found. And so we can see some numbering here. The book has at least, what, I suppose 37, 38 is the biggest number that I see. So it puts 38 on the map. And what I should have said in the beginning is that these are 2 pages. He takes 2 pages to do them. That's why the map looks like it's got like a rectangle going through it. It's because I had to join 2 pages in a visual editing program, graphical editing program, okay? And then I put them together. But one day I'll show you how it looks in the book. Of course, it's just monochromatic. It doesn't have any of these colors, and it doesn't have that blue area that I joined, which most narrowly groups together all of the occurrences of the name Celt, okay? And so as you can see, the clear focus of these names are in Lusitania. You can see it appears in northern Portugal, and then north and central Portugal, and then it starts to go east of Portugal into this area of Extremadura in Spain. And then it goes even down a little bit more with the 35 and 42. Oh, so there's 42 at least, into this area of Celtica. You see the 35 and 42 there, the 10, the 40. So Celtica is where the people who called themselves Celtici lived. And where I named Celtia, not just this green part, but the whole yellow part of it, is where the majority of these names Celti appear. Okay? And also with the stems Celts in general. They appear majorly here, and then they expand just a little bit east and a little bit north through Asturian and Cantabrian territories, okay? So when we say, Metatron, that nobody called themselves Celts, this is the first evidence that I'm going to show to the contrary, that they actually did. And the places that they call themselves Celts in are majorly Western Iberia, and mainly Lusitania. So basically the Lusitanians call themselves Celts. By the way, if you want to know if anyone in this book called themselves Lusitanian, the answer is no. There's not a single tombstone. There's not a single anything, any kind of fragment, nothing. There's not an entry for Lusit, so on, wherever you want to stop. So they never, the Lusitanians, that is actually probably some older name that then the Romans decided to use for these people. But at the time that the Romans met them, they were not calling themselves Lusitanians. They were calling themselves Celts by these various suffixes. And as I have made a point, Metatron, I also want to make this point to you, as I've made yesterday. This is now a good time to make that as well. Is when we have these names with all of these different suffixes, as we have seen, Celtianus, Celtiatus, and so on, as we have seen most easily in these pictures here, Celtiatus, and then we have this other one that reveals where the Celtianus is, but is not showing here. And also we have these prefixes, Arceltus, Conceltus, but we should have the Celtianus appearing here. For some reason it just doesn't. I don't know why it just went outside. There you go. Does this show the Celtianus? It does say that it does. It says right here, Celtianus. But where is it on the map? Here it is in pink. So in pink you have Celtianus there. So when we have these different suffixes for the same stem, this means that these names are better integrated into the onomastic system of that ancient area, and that therefore they can be regarded as its original component. Again, I don't exactly know this book, but it's about Illyrian, and someone makes this point, Metatron, with these names. You see how it repeats on the last line here of this paragraph. Buka, bukiku, buko, bukio, bukirega. It repeats the stem, but then changes the suffix. And then again with ena, enio, eno, enico, and so on. And then again with lasso, lasaio, lascontio, and so on. And then again with voltanis, voltarenis, voltaron, voltarons, voltilius, voltiellos. And so he makes the point that when you find these names with the same stem, but varying with the suffix quite a bit, that they can be regarded as its original component, because it shows that they're better integrated into the onomastic system of the ancient area in question. So this I use also to corroborate the fact that the reason why these names, all starting with Celt but then ending in different suffixes, appear basically in Western Iberia, it's because that's their origin. That's the origin of the people who call themselves Celts. So we're going to go back to the video that you were making a point where the Greeks basically have this situation, right? And so let's go back to that. It wasn't this one. It was this.
Ellada for Greece, which they still do in Greek today. And so they were Hellenes, if we want to translate it in English.
So that's all Greeks were Hellenes.
And but that's not, and they used that term back in the day, but the Roman...
They used it back in the day, they still use it today. Hellenes, Hellas, they used it to call their country still, I believe. And but they didn't call themselves all Greeks, so that's the point he's making.
And Etruscans didn't. And it really has to do with the
Let me go back here.
In the day, but the Romans and Etruscans didn't.
So the Romans and Etruscans didn't call themselves Hellenes?
And it
didn't call the Greeks Hellenes?
It really has to do with the fact that there is one of the many
tribes of Greeks or tribes of Hellenes,
not ethnicities, but the many regions of Greece, where there was a people specifically. You have a multitude, right? Dorians and all the different ones. There is one specific type that had a name that is similar to like Graikoi, and that's the ones that went into central Italy. And so the Romans and Etruscans, when they dealt with them, they called them by their regional name rather than by the old Greeks kind of name. You see,
so exactly this, Metatron, is what Strabo told us happened to the Celts. I think that the Galatae as a whole were by the Greeks called Celtae on account of the fame of the Celtae, or it may also be that the Masiliotes, and by the way, these Celtae are from Narbonenses, right? This then is what I have to say about the people who inhabit the dominion of the Narbonenses, whom the men of former times named Celtae. And it was from the Celtae, I think, that the Galatae as a whole were by the Greeks called Celtae, on account of the fame of the Celtae, or it may also be that the Masiliotes, here as a synonym for Celtae, as well as other Greek neighbors, contributed to this result on account of their proximity. So just as you're making the point, Metatron, that the Greeks did not call all of themselves Greeks, but some of them did, and that name got generalized by the Romans. That's exactly the point that Strabo makes about the Celts. So no Greek is saying we invented this name and it's a synonym for barbarian, and we're thereby giving it to the Celts. Nobody ever said this. This doesn't exist. This is a thought that people have. And perhaps some scholars said this, but they never corroborated it. There's not a passage that says we think Celts mean barbarians. There is one passage in a Greek writing that says that they think Celtic means shored up, because they thought it was from the peoples who with boats went to Iberia. But that was just the Greeks trying to come up with an etymology for it. And I apologize for the water hammer, but the point here is that the exact same thing, Metatron, that you're saying happened to the Greeks happened to the Celtae, to the Celts, according to Strabo. Okay, and I defend with the evidence here in tombstones that this is obvious. Herodotus also says that the Celts were here, but we're going to see that later. But let me go back to your video and see what else you're saying.
Which would have been Hellenes, and that's what stuck. It's similar to why
stuck. So even Strabo says that, right? He says it was from the Celtae, I think, that the Galatae as a whole, on account of the fame of the Celtae, or it may also be that the Masiliotes as well as other neighbors contribute to this result on account of their proximity. So he thinks that it's stuck because of that as well. He doesn't say stuck here. I thought he used a verb, but basically that's what he's saying. He's saying that it's stuck because of the fame of the Celtae, probably, he thinks.
In French, when you speak about Germany, right, you use the term, what is it? Alemania,
right? I think. And so they are, because that, again, with the Germans, right, they met the Alemanni tribe, the Romance speakers in this case. And so to Romance speakers, the Germans are Alemanni. So that exact thing that happened to the Greeks, and now you're exemplifying with the Germans as Alemanni and with the Hellenes as Greeks, happened to the Galatai as Celts, or to the Gallians as Celts. You see, the names most often, probably always, they come from somewhere. They come from an indigenous people. And you can be sure Celts came from these Western Iberians, as I'm trying to demonstrate here.
And that's because of a tribe, a German tribe, the Alemanni. But once again, it's the same thing. You're using the old term connected to a specific tribe to talk about the entire country, and it's stuck. And that's how it is. And then, of course, the English term Germany comes from Germania,
which is also another one that's stuck, because again, the Germans, it was only, I'm going to show a paper later on in another stream, but the Germans, it was only the Germania Superior and Germania Inferior. In other words, the Rhenish Germans, or the westernmost ones, that call themselves Germani, which they also call themselves. It wasn't a made-up term. It wasn't an adopted term, a given term. It wasn't anything like that. And the eastern ones mostly call themselves Suebi, or even the whole of them, even probably all of the Germanic peoples call themselves Suebi. And that was probably their most original term for themselves. And so, it just so happened that the English-speaking world got Germani, or at least the English, and the Romance-speaking word got Alemanni. And so, but as you can see, usually you will pick from one particular tribe and you're going to expand that. So the Romans picked from Galli, from the tribe that was exactly central French, we suppose. We don't know exactly where people who call themselves Galli are, but we do have tombstones about Galli people with that surname, mostly in Gaul. Okay, I don't know exactly what part of Gaul. We'll see later. But so the Romans got Galli and generalized, and the Greeks got Celtai and generalized, probably because the Greeks knew more these shore areas, right? These littoral areas. And so they met the Narbo and the Massalia people first. And those people called themselves Celts because they were in the southern part of Gaul. And then they met also the Iberian Celts. That's why Herodotus knows that there were Iberians who called themselves Celts in Western Iberia, that we're going to see later. And so the point that you're making here, Metatron, about the Germanic peoples and about the Greek peoples, that's exactly what happened to the Celts. The name did not come from nowhere. It did come from a particular tribe, and I'm defending that tribe was the Lusitanians, who actually, as we saw here, called themselves Celts.
The term that the Romans used, but then again, it's not the one that they use. It's not an endonym. Endonym is how people call themselves, Deutschland, right? And it's similar to Japan, Japanese, but they say Nihon and Nihonjin. And so we should use that, but we don't. It's interesting, and maybe making a video about all of the names and why, well, maybe not all, but the most prominent names and why we call them that way would be interesting.
Don't forget to do the Celts as well. And now I'm showing you where the Celts come from. You can show people all these documents. The Celt is also one of those names that got generalized, and it got generalized from the westernmost people. And I'll also show evidence later that they paradigmatically divided Europe in 4 quadrants, and in the western quadrant are represented by the people who were most populous in the western part of Europe, and that to them was the Celts. So it's a very emblematic people, and that's why they picked that name, the Greeks, to use for the whole of those Galatian peoples. Okay, and at this moment, I'm going to have to end it here. I will pick it up from exactly where we're leaving off, but I need to take a quick break to do some things, and I'll be back maybe in an hour or so, and we're gonna do the third stream with the part 2 of Metatron's Celts. All right. And for now, I say goodbye, but I'll be right back after an hour or so with a different stream.
But did they call themselves Celts?